right. I believe this means we are live. I think we are. This show is already shaping up to be kind of strange. I'm going to ask right at the top of this again for folks in the live chat. Give me a mic check. Let me know if this is sounding okay. I've had nothing but issues with my whole system trying to keep like multiple social media and audio and video components running. I don't even know if this is broadcasting yet. It says I'm live. I'm going to say it's good. Vince Navoa, Simon says Hypno, JMX Warrior. I'll say I'm sounding fine. Awesome. I'm going to take a little quick sip of coffee. I spent the entire 5-minute pre-show just trying to sort out my last couple issues and posting to social media, which is going to be a major part of the conversation this morning. Hold on one sec. We're just going to drink a whole big gulp here. You gotta love the sort of the friendly practicality of Michael Corcoran. He's like, good so far. He's totally allowing for the potential failure of my podcast going on. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, aka SomeGadgetGuy, the SGG of this terribly named podcast. As we say every week, the important part is QA. That's the question and answer part. I like to make this an interactive conversation as we've got a really great live chat already building right here. I hope folks are having a lovely summer vacation. If you're getting to have some summer vacation, or especially if you've got kids who are like in day camps and stuff like that and enjoying their summer vacation. I'm going to try and shake up the sort of the order of this week's show. There was like this like big constant pressure of tech news, but it was very sort of focused on a couple of just specific topics that we're going to be talking about this week. And I felt this week was also a really great opportunity to maybe open up the SomeGadgetGuy mailbag. I got a couple DMs from some people that I thought were interesting questions. We can kind of go through some of those conversations. And again, people in the chat being able to contribute to all of that. And it's why I like to start the week this way. I like to kind of kick off our tech week, kind of mixing it up and getting in there and shouting people out and getting to have these conversations. So let me quickly, there we go. So, Tech Boy is in here. Farhan, Dave Burns, Gormlord, Simon Says Hypno, Ron Guido, Muppinish, what's up? Vince Navoa, Kappa Cash, what's up, what's up? Did I say Dan, Grounded Tech? Did I already say Dan? Dan's in here now, too. McCorcoran, Al Sabachley, Onscon, Frank Gallo, J-Man150, JMX Warrior, who else did I miss? Did I say Dave? I think I said Dave, and Simon Says Hypno. Okay, so... I wrenched my back pretty great doing something stupid. I was in the middle of producing a video and it required me lifting some heavy things. I'm going about, and like, I did all the video stuff just fine. Like, I can't say anything because part of this is under embargo, so I have to be really careful what I say. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm lifting these heavy things. I'm moving these things around. I'm putting all this stuff together, and I'm doing great. After I'm done with all of the tech stuff, because I'm shooting video and building a product all at the same time, while cleaning up after myself, I reached down just from the waist to pick up a piece of styrofoam, the lightest part of all the packaging. And as I'm standing back up with a piece of styrofoam, the lightest part of all of the packaging, I feel my back. It's not like anything like pops. It's like all of the muscles in my back dehydrated. And it was sudden. I haven't had this feeling in a really long time. The last time I did this to myself, I was in my mid-20s, working at the DOE facility that I used to be a contractor at. And we would joke about having harvest season, where at the end of the year, all of the labs are sort of exhausting their budgets. And they needed help in the warehouse, basically just slinging Mac Pros. The big old school Power Mac not Mac Pros, Power Macs, dual socket, dual core Power Macs. And so I'm down in the warehouse and I'm throwing these boxes around because I'm a tough 20-year-old and I'm super strong. And same thing where I reached down to pick up something not that heavy. I think it was like a cable kit. And I felt all of the muscles in my back just sort of like, and it was like this. So I spent most of Saturday and Sunday not able to bend at the waist. It was so bad. I have so many videos to work on, and I can't do this. So if this podcast runs a little shorter because I'm sitting in not the most ergonomic chair. Oh, I should have gotten a pillow, like just a little extra, like, you know, sort of lower back lumbar support. I might need to pause the podcast and just shove something behind my back there. So that was my weekend. I hope everyone else had a lovely weekend. I did something dumb, but hopefully it results in a fun video for y'all. Dave Burns, Juan becomes one with the boomer. Oh man, I try and say, you know, like, hey, I prefer the term elder millennial, but like, dag, yo, dag. When your lower back is messed up. Simon says if no, Juan is lying. He's wearing a Shatner girdle. I wish. Actually, you know what? I am getting to that point where if I'm going to be doing some of the videos that I have planned, I really should be doing a better job of like, well, maybe I need a back brace and some of those fancy knee pads because, oh, that's another thing too. My right knee, I need to go get it scoped or something because whenever I go down on my right knee, there's like, it doesn't hurt, but it's like tension is pulling to one side, and I'm worried that maybe I have like a meniscus tear or something like that. So getting old sucks. It's no fun, no fun at all. Let me take another drink of coffee here. Oh, Muppinish, I'm so sorry to hear that. Muppinish says my back is also whack, been weird for a couple of days. I I never want to take it for granted. Just the little movements and things that, you know, you kind of pick up and you move around with. I just got a text from my wife. Hold on. Just a real timeout real quick here. Because I always joke about how Marie doesn't really watch my show. So outside the door of the office right now is a pillow for my back. So she caught part of the intro here. I'm just going to go walk over real quick and get it and hopefully prop myself up so that we can talk a little bit longer. Now, oh good, the auto tracking on my camera's working so you can watch me. Gonna lift. Oh yeah, that was good. That was some good standing. Thanks, babe. You're welcome. Best podcast ever. All right, let me just kind of put that right there. And I'm gonna back into this like a truck. Got dumps like a truck. Oh, yeah. Oh. Dan, shut up. Don't walk over too quick, Juan. So, I married well. Oh, that is better. I'm just gonna... Oh. Hopefully you guys heard that on the mic, because that was my sternum popping. Oh, super gross. Worst ASMR ever. So, we have a lot of tech news to dig into. I spent quite a bit of time. If we're going to be doing sort of a loose housekeeping here, I am in production on several videos all at the same time, and they're kind of kicking my butt. And I'm wanting to kind of diversify, kind of spread the channel back out. This is sort of the death of a YouTube channel, and I'm trying to run headlong into not playing by the algorithm rules, but still seeing if I can build some kind of audience here. So when it comes to the videos and things that we really put out, it took so much work and so much effort to get the Xiaomi camera review out that I kind of slow played this week. I had one thing. Let me go into a screen share here real quick. If you're on the Patreon, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy, there's a 58-minute long camera review for the Xiaomi 13 Ultra that was very difficult to produce. Like, it was numerous delays, tons of footage that I had to collect from the phone, and at the same time, I was really spending more time using the phone than reviewing the phone. Here, let me get this up. But a part of that, about a 5-minute section, is something that I cut out and I did post publicly, which is did Xiaomi lie about the 13 Ultra's telephoto? And we talked about this a little bit on Best of Our Week. I really thought this story would maybe pick up a little more traction. Who remembers, who in the chat here remembers when OnePlus kind of lied about the telephoto reach, and I want to say it was on the OnePlus 5? I think it was the OnePlus 5. Was that one of the first ones that they did dual camera sensors? So if we remember back, OnePlus put out a phone and they said that the zoom reach was a 2 times telephoto reach. But it really wasn't. The actual sensor gave us one focal length that was technically like 1.6 or 1.7. Yeah, Farhan is saying, I remember on the OnePlus 5. Dave Burns, I'm getting to that. It was not the OnePlus 7 Pro. Haha, you're wrong. Someone is wrong on the internet. I should not have done that. Moving too quickly is aggravating my back. So I'm feeling just good enough to do dumb things that keep tweaking my back. Sorry. So the OnePlus 5 had this digital crop that would give us extra telephoto, but OnePlus advertised, I forget what it was. I want to say it was like an 8 megapixel camera at this focal length, and that wasn't true. The OnePlus 7 Pro, OnePlus advertised an 8 megapixel camera at a specific focal length, and that was accurate. The sensor, they weren't using the whole sensor, they were using a smaller piece of the sensor for a longer crop factor, but they completely accurately described the optical performance of that telephoto. And nerds went crazy. Oh, OnePlus is lying. The sensor is really different. And you're like, no, this is how we know techies don't really know anything about photography. Because if you calculate the crop factor, OnePlus lied on the OnePlus 5, but told the truth on the OnePlus 7 Pro. So, bringing this all back to the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, the medium telephoto is not what Xiaomi is advertising. And it kind of took me by surprise. Like, I did the math on, because I tried to do that thing where I talk about, like, if you were to compare the photos from this sensor against a full frame mirrorless camera, it would look kind of like this. And so I'm doing the math on the main camera. Everything's checking out. It looks gorgeous. It's beautiful. I totally get it. The ultra wide, similarly, like if you calculate, your crop factor versus the actual aperture, it should look like this on this style lens. Totally checks out. The super telephoto, 120 millimeter equivalent, doing this, checking that, everything looks right. And then I get to the medium telephoto and you're like, oh, but if I'm going by the crop factor, technically this should be like f13, but if I'm going by the focal length of the lens, then this should be like f11. And if I'm checking, how are they getting to 75 millimeters? Because they're not changing the sensor size, because that would change the crop factor. Lots of basic algebra later, I find the discrepancy in the Pro mode. The Pro mode shoots one field of view, the Auto mode shoots a different field of view. And Xiaomi doesn't advertise the Pro mode field of view, they advertise the Auto mode field of view. And that's closer to the controversy of the OnePlus 5. So it still doesn't take away from me what is one of the most brutally competitive smartphone cameras on the market today. That still holds true, but it makes me a little cranky that what they're advertising is not what the phone is really doing. So I've got a video, a part of the 58-minute long camera review talks about that. And that there's a little piece of it that I cut out. You can catch that on SomeGadgetGuy.com. So Farhan, no, they didn't. See, this is what drives me crazy. Um, Dave Burns, they did the same thing with the OnePlus 7 Pro, but not the first time. They did not. The OnePlus 7 Pro was completely accurate. So the OnePlus 7 Pro's telephoto sensor is a 12 megapixel sensor. They only use the middle 8 megapixels. So that gives you less sensor surface area, which simulates a longer telephoto, longer focal length, a more zoomed field of view. The OnePlus 5 was a digital crop that they tried to make it seem by upscaling was more zoom. The OnePlus 7 Pro, they weren't advertising a 12 megapixel 3x zoom. They were advertising an 8 megapixel 3x zoom. So they advertised exactly what they gave you, and that was legitimate. That was optical from the sensor and the lens at 8 megapixels. It was a 3x zoom. Whatever the actual focal length was, I don't remember now, but I want to say it was 3x. Techies saw it's a 12 megapixel sensor, so they're cropping. But that's not what they said. They didn't say, we're giving you a 12 megapixel image at the longer zoom. They said 8 megapixels, 3x zoom, and that's how crop factors work. It was like, you don't really think on the back of your phone there's a 60 or 70 millimeter lens, right? That would stick out way farther from the back of your phone. That's why we're doing these periscope, like we bend the optics so they line up in different ways just so that we can make longer lenses fit in the body of a phone. And even then, the main thing that you're seeing is using smaller and smaller and smaller sensors to simulate the equivalent focal length of a longer lens. That's why you can almost double the equivalent focal length on a Note 23 versus a Xiaomi 13 Ultra, is because the sensor size is about half. So you multiply by 2 and you can double the effective focal length by cutting the sensor in half. The OnePlus 7 Pro was legit. The OnePlus 5 Pro was an upscaling lie. And the Xiaomi 13 Ultra's medium telephoto sensor is closer to the claims and performance of what OnePlus did on the OnePlus 5. OnePlus 7 Pro was real. And anyone who's still thinking, or like, because of all the techies that started like whining about different camera specs, they were all wrong. And you can take that whatever you care about the OnePlus 7 Pro now today. It's great. But this is what bothers me, is like, we've got so many techies out here that come to the wrong conclusion based on data that they don't understand. And especially when it comes to photography, man, are most techies really bad at this stuff. And they perpetuate this wrongness with confidence. And I did the same thing with audio tech back in the day. I actually had to take kind of a stab at GSM Arena and David Ruddock. It's one of my all-time favorite editorials on my own blog site, SomeGadgetGuy.com, where it's like, from people who listened to phones with HTC boom sound, they picked up an LG quad DAC and just assumed that it was some kind of manipulation of EQ. And they didn't test it, but they were confident that it was just some kind of gimmick magic, make the audio sound bassier button, right? They were incorrect. And the same thing now happens with this kind of camera tech. So I was actually kind of surprised that like no one else sort of picked up on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra that there's a trick that's being played and it's not the real actual performance that Xiaomi is advertising. So it's kind of a bummer. I'm gonna take another drink of coffee here. Baseball Super, I'll need to see your calculations. All right, so Baseball Super on the OnePlus 7 Pro. Let's see if I can find this pretty easily. 7 Pro. So this was from May 24, 2019, and I'm just gonna drop this in the chat. So Baseball Super, you can read through. And here, I'll screen share it here real quick. The OnePlus 7 Pro does have a 3x optical zoom. Why generic consumer measurements suck? So we talk about what is really a zoom lens and how most phones don't really have a zoom lens because the optics don't move. Then we talk about how we calculate the differences in sensor sizes. So we talk about crop factors. Dave Burns, no, please, I don't want to do math on a Monday. And then we talk about what the actual focal lengths on our lenses are, because again, you don't have a 23 millimeter lens on the back of your phone. You have like a 5 to 9 millimeter lens on the back of your phone. Then we do some photo comparisons, like here's like a Pixel 3a and doing a crop. We explain how this is different. So the OnePlus 5 had a 1.6x zoom, and OnePlus advertised that it was a 2x zoom. And they would upscale, they would crop and then upscale. And so if we know, if we think that's bad, we should also be really upset about what Samsung does. Samsung doesn't have 12 megapixel sensors on their telephotos. They have 10 megapixel sensors on their telephotos, and they just magically save 12 megapixel images. So it was really bad when OnePlus did something like that to crop and upscale, but Samsung is always fine. It's always fine when Samsung does it. And so then we were complaining about the OnePlus 7 Pro, and I explained how this is the opposite. So, Baseball Super, read, check all the math, get back to me. I want a full in-depth response to, what is this? This is like a 4,000 word article. Oh, and then I also did an update talking about like image compression behind your subject with varying focal lengths. So real easy, basic stuff. If you knew anything about photography, this stuff would be super, super basic. This is like photography, I'll step it up. It's like a photography 102 class. Not a 200 level course, but like you've already done your intro to how a camera works, and now you're talking about lenses. So photography 102. This is utterly basic. And if techies actually knew what they were talking about for photography, we wouldn't question any of this. We would all just kind of understand it. Random hobby. Wait, but what about optical distortion? If I take a 50 millimeter lens and I put it on an APS-C camera, it will be zoomed in like a 75, but doesn't its optical distortion still look like a 50? Do the phone cameras then have, oh wait, that cut off. Do the phone cameras then have the same distortion as, say, 9 millimeter lens, but because of the crop, they turn out to be a 70 millimeter equivalent, but wouldn't they be very distorted? And if you look at the raw files, you often will see barrel and pincushion distortion based on the lenses. And this is also the difference between different types of wide angle lenses. So you can have a really wide lens and it can be rectilinear, or you can have a really wide lens and it can be fisheye, right? So you can kind of, especially once we're kind of around 10 millimeters on a full frame image sensor, you can make a choice on how you're trying to build the lens. Do you want it to be somewhat more accurately rectangular? It's still going to be super distorted, but you can kind of force it. Or do you want it to be more naturally fisheye? More barrel distorty. Your phones do that too. And in your JPEG finishing software, you'll often see, like especially if you take a raw photo in your pro mode and you're comparing that against the JPEG, you'll often see just that little pop, 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 as the software will correct for some of the known barrel distortion of having a 9 millimeter lens on the back of your phone. So this, what you're saying is absolutely correct. You don't have a 23 millimeter lens on the back of your phone. You have a 5 to 9 millimeter lens. And that's also one of the reasons why we see so much, I want to say this sort of like learned body dysmorphia. When you look at photos of yourself from phones, unless they're composed really well, you get a sort of warped or distorted view of what you really look like. And that's why it's been so refreshing to kind of step back with some of these other equivalent focal lengths where you can step away from your subject a little further for a portrait mode. It kind of reframes and it gives you another photographic capability to more honestly capture your subject. And so again, that would be a benefit on the Xiaomi 13 Ultra. That medium telephoto at 75 millimeters is kind of a great portrait telephoto equivalent field of view, and it backs you off enough from your subject that it kind of mitigates, it kind of handles some of that optical distortion of having a crazy wide lens then made to look like a narrower lens. But this stuff all gets really messy if you don't really know anything about photography, which so many of our tech reviewers think they know about cameras, and they really don't know anything about cameras. Just one other little bit of housekeeping, and something that I'm not gonna spend too much time on this. We're gonna talk about it here in the show later. I also got to play around with this under embargo, the Sony HT-AX7. It's a portable theater Bluetooth sound system which does something I've never heard before. So it's Bluetooth speakers for spatial or surround sound audio, which is pretty great. Yeah, I was about to just start explaining the video. I'm gonna save that for the second half of this podcast, as we can actually get into some of the speaker conversation here, because it's right here next to me is this guy right here. As my camera freaks out, and I'm gonna turn it so that I can more easily pick it up from its little base grip. I gotta tell you, having a wife who brings you a pillow in the middle of your podcast is pretty stinking great. I would highly recommend acquiring one if you don't have one, because she's amazing. This is so much more comfortable than how I was sitting just with my back in the chair. Random hobby, you just blew my mind about that distortion knowledge. Well, good, I'm glad. See, the fun thing is learning about this stuff. I am so miserable whenever I have to recycle the same beginner level conversation every single time. It's what burned me out doing audio gear. So before I was Some Gadget Guy, I was Some Audio Guy, and Some Audio Guy would talk about microphones and recording and interfaces and mixers and all that stuff. But I would keep getting the same beginner level, what's the best microphone for a bassy man voice like mine? And you're like, that's not how any of this works. And if I don't feel like I'm still learning stuff, then I crash hard. I have zero interest in, I already made videos about, well, this is what like your depth of field will look like. And if you have a smaller phone camera sensor, it will look like an APS-C or a full frame camera at f13. Like, I've already done that. I don't want to keep having to do that. Just because our algorithm won't respect an old video that still has the same information. It's like, no, you've got to do it now for a Galaxy S23. But I already did it for a Galaxy S10. No, you need to do it again. There's a Galaxy S24 out next year. You got to make the same video again. And it kills me. It just kills me. So the most exciting thing about these new exotic camera sensors, the new Sony sensors especially, when we start doing the math, how they stack up against real mirrorless cameras is getting really good. From the 1/1.3 inch type sensors and larger, we are right on the heels of Micro Four Thirds performance at the sensor. Obviously, there's still some lens discrepancies, like what kind of glass you can put on a mirrorless versus what kind of glass you can put on a phone. But I did a bokeh test on the 13 Ultra. So comparing the bokeh against my Lumix, my Panasonics, which are Micro Four Thirds, I even dug out one of my old Canons, so my Canon 7D against a kit lens on a Canon, and then also how it what it kind of looks like against the Vivo. It is worth talking about things like spherical aberration and lens flaring, and how these lenses might overcorrect. Are you getting soap bubble bokeh? Are you getting onion ringed bokeh, the manufacturing of the lens? All of those things contribute to the artistic look of a piece of glass. And now we have phones that kind of directly compare against things like classic Zeiss Biotar glass. And Scoop in my chat is going to know what I'm talking about. But if you've only been listening to tech tubers who can't figure out how to say Sony Xperia 1 Mark III, but they shoot on Sony Alpha cameras and they have no problem saying like a Sony A7S II, you will never get that kind of examination. We are at a point where the glass on our phones is comparing against the cheaper kit lenses that come with APS-C cameras. It's phenomenal. Hold on, I'm gonna take some more, drink some more coffee here. Oh no, let's not go too deep. Yeah, Dave Murray definitely wins Partner of the Year. Let's not go on to like websites advertising pillow wifeys. I don't know that I can sponsor that. I don't know that that's going to be the hook for me. So I do have some news articles that we've got to chew through this week. This is when I was talking about at the beginning of this podcast. One of the main topics has been threads. I was going to try and find some more clever way to lean into that. Hold on, I had. Oh, did I? I was going to add it to the chat. So, okay, so from Quiver Quantitative, and I don't know how accurate these numbers are, but this seems to be one of the pages that other news outlets are using to follow the rise of threads. If I screen share this right now, from its launch, 3 days ago to today, we are now roughly estimating 101 million users on Threads. Threads, the Meta Twitter clone. So here's what I want to kind of throw out. Here's what I want to kind of throw out here for the chat. I'm having a hard time sort of celebrating the user attach rate of Threads. This is not 101 million new users. This is 101 million Instagram users who are being given a conversation tab for their Instagram app. I feel like that is an important quantitative difference between the numbers that we see at Blue Sky and Mastodon and Hive. You are not asking someone to sign up fresh, and you are encouraging the most popular people over on Instagram to maintain their popularity, because we know how Meta likes to tinker with the psychology of their users. This one is very clever. If you are already had a social media following on Instagram, you don't have to do anything. You push a button and you say, follow everyone that I was already following on Instagram. And then when people sign up because they don't want to feel left out, all of your users and followers and who you're following just get transferred over to Threads. So in the 2 days that I've signed up, I now have like 1,300 followers on Threads, and it really doesn't mean anything. The engagement that I get for those 1,300 users on Threads is about the same as what I'm currently getting on Twitter with 16,000 followers. And for every post that I kind of copy between all of our various social media networks, I'm getting way more user engagement, actual humans interacting with what I post over on Mastodon with only 500 followers or 400 and something. Dude, I don't even know if I've broken 500 followers on Mastodon. I think I might be close. Doesn't matter. So many fewer followers, but I'm getting way more engagement because actual humans really get to see and interact with what I post. That's, to me, the kind of breakup here. But I want to say 100 million users is impressive from like a server and infrastructure standpoint. Again, if you just turned on a new service for YouTube and 100 million people hit it in 2 days, most tech companies would have issues fielding that amount of traffic to specific components of their platform. I've watched enough Silicon Valley to know, having a platform is a really difficult thing to do. So this is what I mean, Dave Burns. Is it a tab or is it a separate app? So it's a separate app. If you have to use Threads via Threads app, I'm more inclined to count it a separate user experience. But Facebook's cross-user experience is good, despite their services being garbage. 100 million users is impressive from like a server and infrastructure standpoint. Again, if you just turned on a new service for YouTube and 100 million people hit it in 2 days, most tech companies would have issues fielding that amount of traffic to specific components of their platform. I've watched enough Silicon Valley to know, having a platform is a really difficult thing to do. So So this is what I mean. The server usage of a separate app is impressive, but you did not make 100 million people sign up for new accounts. I opened Threads. It said, "Hey, we see that you have an Instagram account. Do you want to just use that?" And I said, "Sure." And then I was in. As opposed to all of the people who act like Mastodon is such a huge problem because you have to like create a user account and pick a server, right? When you go to Blue Sky, you have to create an account. And that's what I mean when I'm saying, like, do we really want to count this as 101 million new users? They're not. There are 100 million established Instagram users that are just now using their Instagram login for something else. Like, if I can log into your service with my Facebook account, that's sort of just the funnel. It's sort of just the portal. The new web service gets a new user, but kind of, again, I'm using all of these things. They're very bad metaphors for how I'm trying to compare this stuff because like we don't see this. We've never seen something like this before in this exact kind of configuration. But did you really get a new WhatsApp user if the same chat is the backbone of Facebook Messenger and they logged into WhatsApp through their Facebook account? I'm having a hard time saying this is 100 million new users. I don't think it works that way. And especially if you tried to delete your Threads account, right now it still deletes your Instagram account because Facebook wants you so entwined in all of their various services, they're not really different platforms. From Facebook's own positioning, your Facebook, your WhatsApp, your Instagram, your Threads, they should all be kind of linked so that they can't be easily broken up by regulators. So from the outward view, they want you to feel like that's a separate platform. That's not Facebook, that's WhatsApp. But internally, they're all tied together so that you can't just carve them back apart and make them separate services. If like an Elizabeth Warren says you've got to break up big tech, Facebook's going to say, "Oh, but we can't. We can't separate Threads and Instagram. They're kind of linked." So you're not really on a different platform. You're just in a new conversation tab for the platform. That's what they're going to tell lawmakers. But they can also then move the goalposts when they want to say to use, "Oh, but this isn't Instagram, this is Threads." But it's the same because it's the same account and you can't separate them. Oh yeah, Dave Burns. This is what's critical. Shareholders also need to hear endless growth. Juan, don't forget that part. I mean, it's really sad because if we put even just a little bit of money and infrastructure towards the 4 billion people on this planet that don't have reliable broadband access, just think about how many new users we could create and monetize. But instead, we're just sticking with like what roughly 2 billion people that already have decent infrastructure, and we're just trying to re-squeeze them over and over and over again. It's kind of dumb. It's kind of frustrating. Baseball super. It's already plateaued. No more endless. I think we're at the surge of the main top Instagram channels, or I'm sorry, Instagram accounts who don't want to be left out. The FOMO was worth about 100 million signups for Threads. And again, those are sort of the top tier of Instagram users who were already actively using Instagram and had some kind of following that they wanted to maintain. Now we need to see if Threads can continue steady, regular growth and bring people to the platform who are more casual social media and microblogging users. And that's where I think this gets kind of tricky. When we look at the hundreds of millions of users per year on Twitter, and we look at the billion monthly visitors on Instagram, there's like a huge gap for a good middle tier, not middle tier, I mean, it would still be a high tier, but sort of in between. What is, someone please correct me in the chat. I want to say Twitter was somewhere around 300 million monthly visitors to Instagram's billion. And I might have that wrong, but I think it's somewhere around that order that scale, that order of difference. So if Threads can build to a 2 to 300 million a month kind of experience, then it's a direct Twitter competitor, and there's room in that space. I want to say Mastodon is floating between 2 and 4 million monthly users, and I'm good there. I feel like those are the people that routinely and regularly post content, and I'm having better interactions on Mastodon. And I get things like an edit button. Septian is saying Threads is meh. It looks vanilla. I deleted it. Well, Sep, you should check out Mastodon. We've been talking about you joining a good social media network for some time now. You should give it a try. All right. So that was a really long-winded setup. I'm not going to dig too much into this because I don't want to spoil the points of the article. But this is a collaborative publication between Ars Technica and Wired. For those of you who do get anxious about like how social media companies utilize your data, Ars Technica and Wired. This is Reese Rogers over at Wired, but they're sort of sister publications. How Threads privacy policy compares to Twitter and its rivals. And it breaks down, it does a really good job of breaking down how the Android and iPhone apps link to data on your device. And the list of information that Threads is collecting is Facebook level. So every single kind of interaction that you might imagine is being utilized by Threads protocol. When you compare that against something like Blue Sky, where I really don't have any faith in Blue Sky because it's Jack Dorsey, Blue Sky currently is collecting much less information, and Mastodon collects nothing depending on what app you use. So especially if you start off on Mastodon with just the Mastodon app, nothing. It doesn't collect any. There's no algorithm to satisfy. There's no advertiser to make happy. Now, individual Mastodon servers can sometimes have different terms of agreements and terms of service, and different Mastodon apps need to monetize in other ways too. So you might run into a Mastodon app in the future which is doing some kind of targeted advertising or data collection, but that's a layer they're putting on top. And something tells me that if a Mastodon app started getting anywhere near the data collection of Blue Sky, which is way less than Threads, the federated users would probably push back against that app's policies. And you would see people on Mastodon saying, hey, don't use this app, it's collecting all your data. If you really want the nerd conversations, they're over on Mastodon for free and open source software, for software development, for app development, for getting into the weeds on Linux and those kinds of conversations. I haven't seen anything like it in years. I mean, it's pretty intense. So let's see. Next, Spill. They've got kind of the rundown on Spill, on Hive, the incredible list that Twitter tracks on you. So Twitter and Threads are kind of the worst. I said I wasn't going to spoil this article. I still want you to go and read it on Ars Technica, but they're pretty bad. It's pretty bad. From Farhan, Mastodon's official app looks more than all right to me. It just got a refresh too. So the official Mastodon app just got a major refresh, and it helps the onboarding. So if you're signing up for a new Mastodon account, you can't just link it to Instagram like Threads does. You actually have to create a new account. But the onboarding is a little bit easier to help you pick a server to get started. The app looks a little cleaner. It's performing a little bit better. I'm still using Tusky. That's my favorite Mastodon app on Android. But they're all getting pretty good now. The sudden recent influx of thousands of users per server has really kind of helped developers. See, the thing is, once you have more users at scale, you figure out where your other issues are. And having a bunch of new people hit Mastodon new features are being proposed and there's better contribution to all of those services, and we're seeing them all improve. And that's how kind of a loose organization of social media platforms should function. And there are going to be major updates to the Mastodon server platform software coming up soon. And we're currently debating, like, should we add this kind of quote feature like you see on Twitter? Or should we be doing this kind of poll feature like you might see on YouTube communities? So all of those things you can actually contribute to, and then it helps improve or it changes what the impact is for all of the rest of the users out there. It's a very particular kind of vibe because it does feel like old school internet where you have to be curious enough to go out and look for things. And once you do, I think you're much better rewarded on Mastodon for actually finding the stuff that you'd want to see. Dave Burns, that is a big part of the conversation, is whether or not they want to start adding features like Tumblr had, because it's another type of microblogging. Mastodon could absorb some of what made Tumblr an interesting service back in the day. It's got all the potential, and a specific Mastodon instance can make different decisions on what kind of content they want to focus on and what kind of platform they want to build. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Zalbotnik is saying, why would you want to change servers? So I've switched servers on Mastodon once. I was on a server that, when I signed in, they just had like this basic list of this is what our server is about and these are our rules. And so I posted something that had an affiliate link attached to it, and I got an almost immediate, your post is being removed. This is not what our server is about. You will not be warned ever again. If you do anything like this in the future, you're just going to be removed from our server, blah, 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 blah. And it was immediate and brutal and very harsh. Like, the language of the message was also like, hey, we just want you to let you know this isn't what our server is about. It was, you effed up and we're taking you down. And so I switched servers. Like, I totally appreciate if that's their rule, but the reaction to a potential violation of their rule from someone who was trying to participate in good faith was so beyond what was necessary that I was like, I don't want to mess with people on the server if this is how they react to things. This is way too reactionary a response. So I switched servers and I've been way happier. And again, the server I switched to much better and more clearly laid out what their server rules were. There we go. I can speak the English. And yeah, and I've been doing fine. I've been doing great since then. So to me, it's like, if you didn't clearly lay out how harsh and punitive your server rules are, and then if someone transgresses one of those rules and you're like, we're gonna blacklist you, and you're like, okay, I can go somewhere else. I don't have to be here, and that's fine. And again, servers can change their rules over time, and then you can decide, is this really the platform that I want to stick with, or do I want to go to a different server and work with a different community of people? And everyone who was following me can still follow me over on that other server. It's kind of like Discord, right? If someone starts getting really crazy, cranky, dictatorial on a Discord, you can go find other Discords to hang out in. And you can still chat with all of your friends from the previous Discord server too. So it's fine. It's good. Yeah, Farhan, some of them do. Farhan says, I think those different servers act like Reddit community. And some of the people who run their own Mastodon servers act totally like that kind of authoritarian Reddit moderator. I am in charge of this Mastodon instance and I rule with an iron fist. So, moving right along. This one, again, it's not something that we have to spend a lot of time on, but it was an app that I was honestly kind of surprised hadn't already done this. So this is coming by way of sfgate.com, the tech reporting from Joshua Boat. Bay Area tech company Evernote lays off most staff relocating to Europe. And from the article, the Redwood City-based note-taking company, which has weathered all manner of tumult over the past decade, capped off last November by the sale of the company to Italian app maker Bending Spoons, axed nearly all its employees in the United States and Chile, according to a statement from Bending Spoon CEO Luca Ferrari provided to SF Gate. Most of the company's operations will be transitioned to Europe. They're looking at streamlining their let's see. Bending Spoons announced last year it surpassed 100 million in annual revenue. It also snagged a $340 million funding round backed by Italian banking giants and Maximum Effort, Ryan Reynolds' company. There are no mentions of Evernote's profit or unprofitability in Ferrari's last statement. So, let's see. 400 employees in the United States and in Chile are being let go, and they're streamlining and moving all of their staff to Europe. So Evernote was one of those funny ones. Like, we had a conversation about this on the Discord, and I think Dave was actually contributing to some of this too, where Evernote was the gold standard in sort of this note-taking and collaborating style of, again, sort of micro note-taking, right? Not necessarily something you would always turn to a computer, but you could then sync and share and work remotely, like off of phones and tablets and laptops, and you could collaborate on all of this data. And there was another podcast I was listening to, and I don't remember who it was, but they got into this sort of side tangent conversation about why can't a company just be the best of what it does? Why does it always need to be, well, we're doing this and we're growing and we're making more money and we're showing more profits? And at some point, how do you get a company to kind of level off and keep a consistent, like, we are the best at doing this, and we're not growing like we were when we started up, but we're consistently raking in cash, we're consistently servicing the needs of our users. Why can't that just be? And I think Evernote is kind of a good example. It's a good case study in, a company comes out and they say, hey, we want to do this. Smartphones are disruptive. Mobile tech is exciting. 3G networks are building out. We're making this collaborative note app experience the best we can. And then Google says, we can make something almost as good and put it out for free. Okay, so how do you keep people paying for Evernote? Well, we've got to add features. We've got to disrupt our own market. We've got to shake things up. And Evernote became this strange, clogged version of itself. And at the same time, you can look at the other paid services like OneNote. So Microsoft says, hey, we've got collaborative and online tools in Office. What if we just include a really high quality notes app in your Office subscription? So why would you pay for the Evernote subscription if you're already going to be using OneDrive and OneNote and Word and Excel, and that plugs into Skype and you get Skype calling credits and all this other stuff? And you're like, okay, well, what Evernote is a lot cheaper than Office, but with Office I get all this other stuff. So you can't just be Evernote and be the best at what you do. If another company can look at what you do and say, hey, we can make a reasonable facsimile of that and build it into another one of our own products and push them out of this space. And it's just kind of sad. We want competition and we want companies to shake things up, but instead I think often what we see is this, this notion of a company has a good idea and other companies copy it. Twitter was an amazing micro blogging service, and now, because all of these other companies smell blood in the water with Elon Musk trashing Twitter, everyone's just trying to recreate Twitter. We haven't seen the evolution of what micro blogging could be. We're all circling the same sort of plateau of micro blogging. So we don't get to grow. We kind of just hold steady until someone else wins in this space. I don't know, but it's really tough. Oh, Ghost Starscream. Yeah, I didn't realize. I knew they had been bought out. Ghost Starscream says, I always thought Evernote was owned by Samsung. Samsung, one of the things I always do like to credit Samsung is how much they like to collaborate with other platforms. So the Microsoft collaboration on Samsung phones, I always really appreciated. It was sort of a glimpse into, you can go with first party services. Samsung had some. You could go with Google. You have an Android phone, Google and Android. But with a Microsoft partnership, you get to see sort of how you can flesh out an Android phone with other apps and services and platforms. And I always liked that idea. And so Evernote was one of those that was often preloaded, I want to say, on a number of phones. And it was interesting, like, oh, why could I use this Notes app? Or Evernote has a free trial because I bought this phone, and I could try that too. But yeah, I didn't realize that they had been bought by some random Italian company. But yeah, the fact that Ryan Reynolds' company also backed Bending Spoons is kind of just an interesting little tweak in this whole story. He's got some cash, I guess, after selling Mint to T-Mobile, but yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah, Awesome Possum. It's so frustrating. Leveling off is failure to investors. And you're like, there's never going to be sustainable. It makes every company feel like a rug pull, right? I'm going to invest in this company while they're growing, and then I'm going to pull money out once they level off with a profitable business. That makes it seem like stocks are just a rigged game. Like, you're not actually investing in a company because you think that they can create sort of a healthy platform of sustained continuous profits. It's, I'm only going to go with them while while profits increase, and then once they find the saturation point of their market, well, game over. Seems wrong. It seems like the incorrect way to do the business. But yeah, it's pretty rough. Yeah, no good. All right. I've got just, do I? I've got two other stories here, and again, we don't have to spend a ton of time on them. Kind of like the Ars Technica, I feel like this is a story that's going to roll out over time, and we want to keep an eye on what the ramifications of something like this is. Uh, I, I I thought this was kind of an interesting one to have break over the weekend. Sarah Silverman is going to sue OpenAI and Meta, claiming AI training infringed copyright. US comedian and two other authors say artificial intelligence models used their work without permission. The lawsuit against OpenAI. Oh, sorry. This is I read this first by way of The Guardian, written up by Dan Milmo, and that's what's going to be linked on SomeGadgetGuy.com. The lawsuit claim. Let's try reading for real, Juan. Let's do that. The lawsuit against OpenAI claims the three authors, quote, did not consent to the use of their copyrighted books as training material for ChatGPT. Nonetheless, their copyrighted materials were ingested and used to train ChatGPT. The lawsuit concerning Meta claims that many of the authors' copyrighted books appear in the dataset that the Facebook and Instagram owner used to train Llama, a group of Meta-owned AI models. And I think this is going to be a continued tactic. It's funny. We get all hyped up about AI and it's going to displace writers, and it's going to, we can train language models for speech. So it's going to put like audiobook authors out of work. This disruptive technology always manages to hurt like people at the individual level that create things. But then it becomes a battle of massive corporation versus massive corporation, because we know Disney doesn't want AI to be able to model their IP and allow users to create their own content, right? And I think from an individual author's perspective, now we've got some data to say, hey, how are you using this work? We did not authorize this work, and there was no legal framework for us to even examine the potential of a contract in how you would be allowed to use this work. You just took it. And so now we need to see what the courts are going to say, because our copyright law is like 2 generations out of date. Two generations of people have gone by with this sort of antiquated notion on how we own things and how we own what we make. And so now we've got tech companies that are getting in there and disrupting, and they're breaking things, and they're moving fast. And they're going to run headlong into people with actual money saying, oh, but no, not us. It's cool if your AI software can displace workers because we'll profit from that. But if your AI software touches on our ability to make money on what we copyrighted, then we're going to have an issue. So, like, a standalone solo photographer or animator is going to get wrecked by AI. But Disney is going to be like, nah, brah. No, 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 no. We can sue you. So we've got to see how this court case plays out. It's fun for a headline. Oh, Sarah Silverman, she's a stand-up comedian, and what is she gonna in tech and blah 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 blah. She probably just doesn't get it. But no, this is actually going to be kind of a big deal, and it's part of what like the writer's strike is about. Actors might have authorized a strike vote. SAG-AFTRA has authorized a strike vote. I don't know if they will go to a strike also, but this is going to become a bigger and bigger deal in how do we acknowledge the appropriate accreditation of someone who did the work. I want to say it was about 2 months ago. We were talking on this podcast about properly accrediting where the information came from. And now when you search for things on Bing Chat, it's doing a better job of linking where it got information down at the bottom of its replies. So it's not just, you know, hey, Bing Chat, what's the best way to charge a battery for better battery health? And AI used to say, oh, well, charge it between 30 and 70% and don't let it drop below 10%, blah, blah, blah. Now it's saying, according to Tom's Hardware, if you charge your phone between this much and this much, it's now starting to work into its replies where it got the information. And that makes it, I think, a more credible source. It should be more like Wikipedia. But it also supplants. And that's a major problem when it comes to IP law. It's not enough just to credit something. If you build something with the intention of supplanting the original, then you still have an actionable case, in my opinion. You could take that case to court. I am not a lawyer, so my legal opinion isn't worth a whole lot. But I do have Donaldson Califf's book on copywriting and critique. So it's sort of the Bible for documentary filmmakers. If you take someone else's IP, and even if what you make is amazingly transformative, but the point of that is someone could watch your transformed piece and then feel like they didn't need to consume the original, you are technically not operating within the confines of commentary and critique. If you have a Star Wars review and your review of the Star Wars movie is almost as long as the Star Wars movie and goes through every single plot point of the Star Wars movie and spoils the ending of the Star Wars movie and completely dissects every character nuance of the Star Wars movie, someone could argue you are making something for someone to watch and not have to watch the Star Wars movie. You are supplanting the film that you're supposedly reviewing. And I have a really hard time with anything that regurgitates the entire plot. How many YouTube videos have you gone to where there is no insight, there is no analysis, there's no critique, there's nothing insightful, and it's someone going, and then Bob walks down the hallway and he sees Terry, and Terry says, whoa, Bob, what's going on? And Terry pulls a gun on him, and then Bob's like, whoa, and then there's a car chase, and in the car chase this happens, and then after that there's a bomb, and the bomb timer is about to go down, but then they save him at the last minute. I thought the movie was pretty good. You're like, that's not a review. That's you gave us a Cliff Notes regurgitation of the plot. That's not a review. That's not a review, that's not an analysis, that's not a critique. You have failed, sir. You have failed. And so these are the types of conflicts that IP law has never really properly addressed in the world of online and streaming media, especially user generated content. And so this lawsuit from Sarah Silverman actually now stands as an interesting point in how do we accredit and properly compensate the people who did the work. Like we were talking about like news agencies, all of these platforms that produce news are letting go of their staff. And more of these companies are trying these experiments with like chat models, right? What if we used an AI to write out just the press release on this article? Like, okay, cool. But at some point, you do get to the work of a human. And then that human had to be compensated for their time and their effort. But then all of these other companies can immediately just latch on to the work of that human and just copy it with AI. But what happens if we eventually get to a point where humans don't want to do that work anymore or can't sustain a living with that work anymore? And all these chatbots are just kind of copying each other. You eventually get to a point where that system is broken. If the AI models don't have new or fresh information from human authors to keep hoovering up, then you get to a breaking point. And even the AI model becomes unsustainable because it can't create the content. It can't properly analyze world events to create engaging editorials on what's going on. Baseball Super. I really want to watch that bomb movie now. I know, like Terry. Terry was like, whoa. And I was like, oh man. And that was such a big shock and a surprise. And that was a stunning turn of events. So few. I adore movie and film commentary, and so much of it is garbage now. So much. I was listening to another podcast 6 months ago. I was trying to give this podcast a shot, and it really was just like a group of four friends, great chemistry, super funny, awesome. But they would do these like hour-long to 90-minute podcasts where 85% of the podcast is just the people reacting to someone divulging the plot of the film. So it's not even a good reaction channel because they're not reacting to the movie. They're reacting to someone talking about the plot of the movie. And I had to stop. So I was going back through their catalog and I listened to their review of the new Hellraiser movie. And it's four friends, and three of them were like, I couldn't watch it. I don't like scary movies. And the one friend is like, okay, well, let me, I mean, it's kind of the gimmick of the podcast too. So like, let me tell you about it. And then she does this, and then the Cenobites are scary. And then this happens. And the other three were reacting as if they were watching the movie. I can't tell you how miserable a listening experience that was because I kept waiting for. But are you gonna talk about the art direction? Are you gonna talk about the style? Are you gonna talk about the costuming work? Are you gonna talk about the special effects? Some good CG, there's some really terrible CG. And then you'd get to like the end and they would try to cram all of that analysis in the most shallow way possible in like the last 5 minutes of the podcast. And then the other three people are like, whoa, but I'm not gonna watch that movie. What are we doing? But it's so dumb. Oh God. So I already hate reaction videos, and this isn't even a reaction video of the movie. It's a reaction video to someone reading the plot synopsis of the movie from Wikipedia. So bad. Dave Burns, I will put this out here because I believe my initial criticism of this process, I don't believe the Plinkett reviews, the classic Plinkett reviews from Red Letter Media, fall under the heading of commentary and critique if we're calling them reviews. If you're telling me you've made a Star Wars analysis documentary, fine. But something is sacred about the word review, and I don't feel the Plinkett reviews fall into that category. But this is from Dave Burns. Somehow Best of the Worst does a better job reviewing their movies than most commentary YouTube reviews. And Best of the Worst, I think, does a really good job, even with some of the spoilers and stuff, of kind of highlighting what's interesting about sort of failed attempts at filmmaking. Best of the Worst is this great little gem of we're celebrating some of this, and part of it at the end of they are saying like, would you recommend people watch this movie? And they go, no, I don't think I would. Or yeah, but with these reasons. And that actually becomes a more informed kind of review style than most other platforms out there. Go Starscream. So what Juan is saying is that you should start a movie podcast. Uh, so my first incarnation producing online video on the internet was a pretty successful movie review podcast. It was on Mevio and Blip. And back in the heyday of Blip.tv, we were a pretty heavy hitting movie review show. The show was called Movies You May Have Missed, abbreviated MYMHM. I liked that because the mnemonic was Um, when Blip TV and Mevio cratered, most of the show vanished. And it was really hard for us to find all the hard drives and all of the raw footage. We didn't do a very good job of archiving our very first movie review show. And there are 20 or 25 episodes available on archive.org if you search for Movies You May Have Missed or MYMHM. And it's me from 2008. So I'm much younger. So we did find someone had a cache on an old portable hard drive. And so we got, I think, another dozen episodes off of that. And my buddy, my co-host Lee, he had our old production hard drives, and he found another chunk of finished episodes. So I have them, and I keep slowly putting more of them up on archive.org. But it's time consuming, and I want to link to the videos where people can buy them. And of course, archive.org gets really pissy if you put affiliate links and things, and rightfully it's their platform. They don't want people making money off of other posts and things. But I'll probably finish, I don't know, by like 2027, getting all three years. We produced nonstop for 3 years straight, and at our peak, we were pulling roughly 2 to 2.5 million downloads and views a month back in 2010, in 2010. And then it all just vanished. So I loved making a movie review show. I would absolutely go back to making that style of movie review show where it was spoiler free, talking about movies we loved. It had kind of a best of the worst flair to it, because the whole point was, what is your favorite film that none of your friends have seen? And we had guests come on. We had Jack Schaefer. She premiered the movie Timer, and we interviewed her for the premiere of Timer with Emma Caulfield. She later went on to do WandaVision with Disney and with Marvel. We had Jeff Kanata from the Totally Rad Show. We had a couple folks on. We had Darren Norris in our 1 year anniversary. If you know who Darren Norris is, he's a pretty cool dude. So anyway, it's pretty great. Oh, Roth Sothi. Okay, yeah. I don't want to turn this whole thing into another like movie review place, but Roth is saying, haha, but that recent Hellraiser was terrific. Looking forward to the upcoming TV series continuing the story. I am not a Hellraiser fan. I like the very first Hellraiser. I like it. I don't love it. The Hellraiser reboot was pretty good. I think I liked it better than the original. It was really fun. So yeah. McCorcoran saying 99% of the time they never even seen it. 99% of the time they've never even seen it before. I don't. I don't know. How can you know? How can you know ahead of time your reaction will be transformative and not a market substitute? So you got to plan, and I think that's what's really critical about calling something a review. And I'm very precious about that word. If you want to call it anything else, I think that's fine. But it's also why I get pissy with smartphone reviewers. I had the phone for a week under embargo with pre-release software. Here's my full review. You should not call that a review. So, yeah. Baseball Super, it was you, MYMHM Link. It was you. So, we've got one other news story here. Sorry, short story, incredibly long. Keep an eye out on the AI lawsuits because copyright holders are going to push back, and I think it's going to be a really interesting split. I think our courts are very unprepared for the future of AI litigation. And this is really going to change, I think, a lot of the legal direction that our content and our production goes through. Real quick, I want to wrap up our little news section here before we get talking about speakers and Google. Another one that I thought was kind of interesting. I maybe have one of the worst links to talk about this, but this is where I caught it first. Let me cue this up. From CBS News Boston, Harvard professor Avi Loeb believes he's found fragments of alien technology. And so from their write-up, from Mike Sullivan on WBZ News, posted by CBS News Boston, Loeb and his team just brought back... Oh, there's like an auto-playing video. Hold on, sorry. And apologies for the burp there. I was mid conversation. Coffee burps are the worst. Harvard professor Avi Loeb believes he may have found fragments of alien technology from a meteor that landed in the waters off Papua New Guinea in 2014. Loeb and his team just brought the materials back to Harvard for analysis. The U.S. Space Command confirmed with almost near 99.999% certainty that the material came from another solar system. The government gave Loeb a 10-kilometer radius of where it may have landed. So they found these little spherules. I can't say that word without turning into Tom Brokaw. Spherules in Kuala Lumpur. No, that Kuala Lumpur doesn't have anything to do with it. An analysis of the composition showed that the spherules are made of 84% iron, 8% silicon, 4% magnesium, and 2% titanium plus trace elements. They are sub-millimeter in size, and the crew found 50 of them in total. This is a quote from Loeb. Has material strength that is tougher than all space rock that were seen before and cataloged by NASA. We calculated its speed outside the solar system. It was 60 kilometers per second, faster than 95% of all stars in the vicinity of the sun. The fact that it was made of materials tougher than even iron meteorites and moving faster than 95% of all stars in the vicinity of the sun suggested potentially it could be a spacecraft from another civilization or some technological gadget. And the analogy is we've sent out satellites and we've sent out sort of probes that are going to take 10,000 years to leave our solar system, and they're traveling faster. To be able to leave our solar system means they need to be traveling faster than things in our solar system. And so billions of years from now, if a Voyager spacecraft crashes into another planet, there is data for another civilization to say, this was probably made with some kind of intelligence. It came from outside our solar system. It was traveling faster than all of the things near us, and it was made of different kinds of materials than we often see in asteroids that hit our planet. And so that's just kind of exciting. The potential for this to indicate some form of alien intelligence is just a really interesting and kind of fun idea to express. So I linked the CBS News article here, but I'm hoping that we'll maybe get like some kind of follow-up or some other kind of explanation, or hey, we put all 50 of these spherules into a bucket and then a holographic projector popped up. You know, something like from a movie. That would be kind of fun. It would be really amazing. And yeah, Baseball Super, that was really cool. Just kind of a little heartening idea of a light shining out in the dark forest of our universe. I've been rereading The Three Body Problem, and there's so much like beautiful nihilism in that book, but you're also like, oh man, alien intelligences would totally just destroy us, wouldn't they? Oh no. it's uh it's heavy stuff. I mean, it really is like exciting and terrifying and cool, like all at the same time. But you see those little images. It's like perfect little spheres, not perfect, but these interesting little spheres of just different materials. I don't know. I really get lit up about that potential. I mean, a massive Star Trek nerd that I am, that kind of data is so much more exciting than like, look, I took this blurry video. It's totally a UFO. I don't really think alien intelligence is visiting our planet in the form of flying saucers. I really feel like alien intelligence is just sending stuff out into the cosmos. And billions of years ago, someone on another planet was looking up at space and saying, yeah, we can send out a message. I wonder if anyone will ever see it. And maybe we just did. And that would be really cool. That would be amazing. Again, it's like the Carl Sagan version of this versus the like Star Wars version of space travel. The reality of this is just so enormous that it's impossible for me to wrap my brain around, but there's still like a hope. Like there's still an excitement. The potential of this is it's pretty cool. Roth Sati. It's fragments of Namek. We found all the Dragon Balls. They were less than a millimeter big. So funny. It's so dumb, but it's so funny. All right, normally this is where we would have a subreddit plug, but Glowing Rectangles is still out of commission. Please continue supporting your favorite content creators. You have so many new social media platforms to share content on, but we still need to make an effort to help people get around the YouTube algorithm and how terrible search has become for finding new topics and for finding good information on things. So however you would like to continue the mission of Glowing Rectangles, please continue supporting and sharing and subscribing and thumbs upping and all of the things that kind of make our community really, really fun. We don't want to let the pressure off. We want to keep being a part of that conversation. I don't have a lot for the gadget block. I only wanted to kind of highlight this, keep it pretty simple. I really nerd out hard on SoC design. And I think we've seen pretty good evidence over the last 3 years. This is actually what one of my mailbag questions is going to be about. But over the last 3 years, how much it matters who you partner with to make a new chip, a new CPU, a new GPU, a new SoC. And when we transition from one company to another, there can be significant ramifications for consumers. I'm really gilding this lily. Let me just cut to the article here. This is from WCCF Tech. I can never say that easily. Written up by Omar Sohail, and I have mispronounced your name, and I apologize. Google to switch to TSMC's 3 nanometer process for its fully custom Tensor SoC. Company reportedly ditching Samsung after 2 years. So Google has plans to drop Samsung as a foundry partner and switch to TSMC for its fully custom Tensor chip, which is said to launch 2 years from now. Interestingly enough, the advertising giant is said to move to the 3 nanometer process, which is likely the same technology that companies like Qualcomm and MediaTek will adopt in the near future. So, yeah. McCorcoran, Samsung has no clients left. Dave Burns, but I thought Samsung only made the bestest stuff. Watching this whole thing play out has been really interesting. From the sort of peak of LTE, phones running 4G modems and radios. As soon as we started this 5G transition, we saw a shakeup in how Qualcomm was making their chips, how MediaTek was making their chips, how radios and modems were being incorporated. And I really feel, now looking back, this is all with hindsight. At the time, I was gung ho just like anyone else. But really looking back, the 5G transition is kind of what helped tank the reputation of premium tier Android. Because we went from TSMC on the Snapdragon 865, then we went to Samsung on the 888, and Samsung with the 8 Gen 1. And we had 2 years back to back. So you couldn't even escape this. If you had an older premium Android and then you bought in during the Samsung years, I feel like that was the best pressure and advertisement for switching over to an iPhone. And Apple went through similar teething pains too. The iPhone 12s are miserable. They are not good phones. They run warmer than the iPhone 11s. The 5G nukes the battery life compared to the iPhone 11s. But one, you always have a team of Apple apologists in major media positions ready to wag the finger and go, oh, even if it was bad for Apple, it was better than Android, without really explaining to the readers why, what these differences were. Like, anyone who was like, oh yeah, upgrade an iPhone 12 should have also told their readership, don't stick with your iPhone 11, it's a better phone. But they didn't because they're shills. That was mean, and I meant it. But we switched from TSMC to Samsung. Our phones got more performant. They were more powerful, but they also ran a lot hotter. And this is why it's making me a little anxious. I think Tensor is a very good chip. So do I have it over here? Yes. So here's my Pixel 7 Pro. I haven't gotten to spend any time with the Pixel tablet or the Pixel Fold, but they're running the same SoC. So this is the Tensor 2, has a really unique core configuration, and it has a whole bunch of custom Google hardware for managing machine learning and image manipulation. The Google parts of the Tensor are fantastic. And that's why a Pixel 7 Pro can often hang and beat more powerful phones. It's the googly stuff. You want to render video from your phone, Tensor is the fastest way to render 4K video on a mobile device. That should be really exciting. It scores way lower in synthetic benchmarks, but it achieves a higher tier of performance when you give it a real world task. The problems with Tensor are all the Samsung bits, the Samsung CPU cores and the Samsung radios. So, apparently, we were looking at different configurations and what was going to happen. We know that the Gen 3 Tensor that's going to be in the Pixel 8 is going to be a Samsung-made chip. We were hoping that 2024 would be the first year of a Google-designed SoC that's made by TSMC. Now it looks like it's going to be 2025. So we've got this year and next year. And the thing is, I don't want it to be Samsung bad, Samsung fail. I want Samsung to rise to this occasion because they're going to be pouring billions of dollars into the South Korean economy to improve their chip making capabilities. They've lost almost every single current bleeding edge client that their foundry had. We don't want TSMC to be the only company that can operate in the premium tier space. We're going to see increased competition from China. We're going to see increased competition throughout the EU. There are foundries in the EU, and they're looking at trying to scale up to be more competitive. A lot of the chip fab that happens in the EU, I believe, is more along the lines of older components for things like car computers. They don't want to stay there because they'll get eaten for lunch by China as China scales up their chip fabrication capabilities. And then here in the United States, we've got Intel. And Intel is going to get a boon, billions of dollars from the United States government in taxpayer funds to scale up their own operations for improving their own foundry. Intel used to be the gold standard of making a chip, and now they're facing very, very tough competition from TSMC. Nothing I say should ever be used for like investment advice, but we're seeing money thrown around quite a bit because this is going to be kind of the new tech war. China versus I think even Japan is looking at scaling up some foundry, but more for specialty components. Someone please correct me on that. But I even saw like an investment from Sony, I believe. Anyway, so this year we're going to have Tensor G3. I am really anxious about how that's going to perform. I don't believe Samsung has the yield or has the capabilities in place to match TSMC. But if it's better than Tensor G2 and it still maintains a lot of the googly bits, then that could be a really positive step forward. I'm okay with a Tensor G3 if it falls behind a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 or a Dimensity 9200, but it can do some things better. So if you can maintain this performance advantage for manipulating image data, which Google has always been good at, especially going back to the Pixel 4, if you can maintain that, then Tensor G3 still has a place. If Tensor G3 falls behind because of Samsung's fabrication and Samsung's manufacturing, then that's going to be really sad for Pixel fans. We need to see that this drumbeat, that this heartbeat continues, that the evolution, the growth of the platform maintains. Google has the best chance of actually going head to head and competing directly against Apple and creating kind of an Android vertical of hardware and software and services. But these are the teething pains that we kind of need to walk through. My Pixel 7 Pro is a great phone, but the Samsung parts of it kill the battery life and make it run hotter than it probably needs to. Dave Burns. But right now is the optimal time to dogpile on Samsung. We're objectively right. Nuance be damned. McCorkrain, and this is accurate too. The Pixel is also switching to Qualcomm for the watch, and the follow up to the Pixel Watch. You don't want to use an older Samsung SoC. The new Qualcomm SoC that I have in this Tick watch is phenomenal. Is better. The performance on TicWatch is better than the performance on Pixel Watch, and the performance on Pixel Watch is pretty good, but boy howdy, are you not going to get anywhere near the battery life on a Pixel Watch that I can get on my TicWatch. And Onscon, absolutely. The reason why synthetic benchmarks aren't very important is because they're synthetic. Does that mean your tests are organic benchmarks? Well, no, not organic. I always use the word real world. It's real world performance testing, but organic benchmarks does sound kind of cool. Maybe I'll go with that. Uh, so should be interesting to see how this all plays out. I'm so swamped, but I keep side-eyeing that Pixel tablet. I really want to play with one. So I'm hoping I'll be able to share some experiences and some thoughts soon, but I need to like finish up a whole bunch of stuff that's sitting in front of me here right now. And then I can get into adding some new things. I'm really trying not to just grab everything that comes out, do one gimmicky first impressions video, and then forget about it. So I still need to revisit the Vivo X90. I still need to kind of wrap up the last video that I have planned for my Xiaomi 13 Ultra. I still have other things right over there that are under embargo that I can't show you just yet. So it's really tough. I mean, like, Nothing Phone. I feel like we've already kind of eclipsed the conversation about Nothing Phone 2. There's so much, and it's hitting so hard and so fast. I have limited capabilities to cover all of it. And I'd rather go back to what my channel used to do, where a phone would almost get an entire month. I think I might need to just say, hey, for 2024, I'm going to talk about, at most, 10 phones. And we're going to give each phone its own month. And apologies to whatever phone gets February, but them's the breaks. That's what you get. It's just too much. It's too much to do as high a quality of consistent reviewing as what I would like to do. But yeah, I'm really anxious for Pixel 8. I'm really hoping we see some improvements there. And that kind of goes into, this would be sort of a good time to shift. Oh no, there was a comment that I got, a DM. Someone slid into my DMs. And actually, I probably shouldn't show you all of my Twitter DMs, so I'm not going to do that. Hold on one second. I'm going to take a drink of water. I did not plan this very well, but we're going to open up the Some Gadget Guy mailbag and then let that kind of take us into the chat for the last 20 minutes or so as we're hanging out here on the podcast. I think I can easily do the full 2 hours thanks to my wife giving me a pillow. Please do not search for Pillow Wife on the internet. That's probably a bad thing for you. Actually, that's a really good question. Hold on. Gormlord, I had to argue with someone who said the Dimensity 1200 was crap because it's not an 8 Gen 2. It's ridiculous out there. And that's funny too because it's someone who would be like, every car needs to have like a turbocharged V8. Your car doesn't even have a V8, so it's not good. And then there are like Porsche enthusiasts who are like, nah, I'm fine. From Random Hobby, I have the feeling Qualcomm SoCs last longer than MediaTek. Do you think that is true? I don't think you can easily ask a question phrased like that. The the nuance of the semiconductor industry is more complicated than that question. So, in more recent time periods, Qualcomm has worked with manufacturing partners to allow for longer periods of software support. With the Snapdragon 660, they started reaching out to manufacturers like Panasonic. And Panasonic makes a whole bunch of like business grade, law enforcement grade, firefighter grade equipment, tough books and tough tablets and things like that. So they can't put out like a little portable rugged tablet if it's only going to get 2 years of support from Qualcomm. So starting with the Snapdragon 660, we saw Qualcomm start offering licensing deals for like a decade. So now the Snapdragon 660 is still being put into like terminal services and ruggedized equipment. I'm trying to warehouse point of not point of sale, warehouse inventory equipment. Wow, words are really hard right now. So they're still building on that as a unified platform for a product that is built for a particular kind of industry. And the 660 is still being supported today. Now, other manufacturers of consumer goods can pay Qualcomm for longer periods of support, and hopefully that means we'll see this improved, where even Motorola is offering like, was it 2 operating system updates and up to 4 years of security patching? That only comes if the SoC manufacturer, Qualcomm, is able to support that SoC for a longer window of time. I believe very generally right now when we're talking about the most expensive phones, I believe Qualcomm is offering longer support than MediaTek. Generally, generically, but not every manufacturer is going to take them up on that licensing deal. So just because there's the potential for more support on a Qualcomm SoC, it doesn't mean that the manufacturer of your phone is going to pay for it and really offer all of those operating system upgrades. At the same time, we're seeing a push towards less expensive and older devices to get shifted into a different tier of support. Samsung just recently changed on their lower tier Galaxy A and on their tablets with the Galaxy Tab S7. They're no longer going to do quarterly updates. They're moving to biannual. So technically, Samsung is still offering years of support, but once your tablet is like 2 years old, instead of keeping up with the same consistent pattern of quarterly updates, they're going to move you to 2 updates a year. And then at some point, we'll just stop paying attention. I don't know if it'll fully get whatever Samsung promised or if those updates are going to be any good by the time you get to the last year of support. If you're talking about the SoC lasting in terms of performance, I don't see any difference between MediaTek and Qualcomm. I can go back to years old MediaTek SoCs, and they are just as performant as today as they were then. They handle computational tasks comparatively against their Qualcomm counterparts just fine. So it really depends on what you're looking to get out of a long-term relationship with a cell phone manufacturer. And to me, the most critical aspect is security patches. I want to see regulators come in and say, if you sell a phone, you need to offer 5 years of bug fixes and security patches. Doesn't matter if the phone is $100 or $1,500. I feel like that's the next major regulatory consumer impact. You have to support this device with security for this length of time. I do not care if I buy a phone with Android 13 and it doesn't get Android 17. I really don't. I want the best, polished, optimized, secured platform that you sold me, and that over time you are going to that phone will evolve to meet the security challenges of the time frame that it was sold in. So I don't think I could answer your question. I'm sorry, Random Hobby. Yeah, Philippe, kind of the problem with everything. It's all about producing, 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 and you got to churn. If you can't sell the same people, the same phones over and over and over again, then your company is a failure and you're not making enough money. Grumpy boomer rant over. I'm with you on that one though. Yeah, so now we have billions of phones, all kind of similar, same with cameras and everything else. Yeah, it's pretty gross. I do want to get into this. Okay, so this was a DM sent to me from James. This was sent to me on Twitter. Hi, Sir Juan. I'm really sorry to slide into your DMs. I just want to ask if when a phone chipset goes really small, like 3 nanometers, is it more prone to overheat or not? There's so much conflicting information about it, and I'm confused. Thank you in advance. So over the last couple of years, this is kind of dovetailing from what we were talking about with Google going with TSMC. Over the last couple of years, we've been seeing these chips advertise and boast about smaller manufacturing. I believe the Snapdragon 865 was 7 nanometers, and then we dropped to 5, and then to 4, and now we're dropping to 3 nanometers. And the promises of doing a die shrink, sorry, we call that a die shrink. We've shrunk the components. We've made them smaller to manufacture. And we're getting to a point where this is kind of a big challenge. Like, I don't know if you remember back in like the crazy gaming PC days, like dual core Athlons and 120, nanometers. And then we got to, 50 nanometers and nanometers. I'm just throwing out numbers. I don't remember exactly what the die sizes on those things were, but they were significantly larger than they are today. Ignoring all of the complicated nuance of how some companies measure their die, because Intel disagrees with TSMC. Intel does not believe that 3 nanometers on a TSMC fabrication is the same as like 7 nanometers on their fabrication side. That is very complicated. Please follow Tech Potato, Dr. Ian. He will do a much better job of actually breaking down the science because he studied this stuff and he really knows it. I'm kind of loosely oversimplifying and regurgitating what I've learned from him and from Gary Explains. Okay, this is becoming a big deal. When we go from 4 nanometers to 3 nanometers, that doesn't sound like a remarkable change, but that is a substantial decrease in the amount of surface area that is needed to create the same kind of chip. Ideally, in a perfect world, if we could design the exact same chip at 4 nanometers and then shrink it by 25% to go down to 3 nanometers, what we should see is a marked step up in power efficiency. And that's only if it's the exact same chip being run under the exact same load. What happens every single time we have a performance, efficiency, or battery improvement? We push the device harder. So if there's a 25% improvement in efficiency, that's not what those numbers would be. I'm just grossly oversimplifying here. But if there was a 25% improvement to efficiency, a manufacturer of that phone with that chip would say, well, now we can run this phone 25% harder. You never get the efficiency scaling. And this was my biggest problem. If you remember, if we go back to like my Galaxy S21 review, my biggest frustration were all of the Qualcomm marketing PowerPoint presentation slides saying, look, from the 865 to the 888, look at this crazy performance improvement that we can clock. But their performance improvement came with an energy cost. It was like, we can increase the CPU power 15%, and that's going to draw 20% more power from your battery. And what did we get on the Snapdragon 888? We got a chip that was more powerful, but also nuked your battery way faster. So the die shrink is only a benefit in a vacuum if you maintain and you optimize that CPU design for the die shrink. That's never what we get. Instead, we get, well, we're going from a 4 nanometer production to a 3 nanometer production, and we're adding a billion transistors. We're adding a new AI engine. We're adding a new digital ISP for your camera. We're adding all this stuff because now we have more physical space. So when we've shrunk the chip, we're tacking on more stuff because we have 25% more surface area to play with. And that's where we run into trouble. With this yearly cycle, not every chip is going to be better than its predecessor. And I think we saw that with the 8 Gen 1. The 888 was a better, more consistent performer than the 8 Gen 1. The 8 Gen 1 is more complicated and more futuristic and has more stuff on it. And it's more powerful and better reference designs from ARM, blah, 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 blah. But we didn't go from the 888 to the 8 Gen 1 and see real practical, real world improvements. So we're sort of learning the wrong lessons when we just talk about the fabrication size. Because we've had 3 years of chips performing kind of worse than their predecessors, even though the fab process got smaller. Even though there were die shrinks, we tacked on way too much stuff. So then you get into who made the chip. So when you have a die shrink, it really matters how mature that fabrication is. Whenever we go down in size, we hear about yield. So you get a big wafer, you carve out all the little chips on it, and not all of those chips are viable. Immediately after a die shrink, we have to start calculating how many of the chips are viable, because that makes chips really expensive. If your yield is really, really low, like say only 20% of the chips on a wafer are good to go, then you've wasted 80% of that wafer size. Those chips that are viable are going to be crazy expensive because they have to account for all of the wasted potential of that manufacturing process. So as a die shrink continues and optimizes and the company gets better at making those chips, that's why we see prices kind of level off and then start to drop, because it becomes more cost effective. But we've created an industry where every year these companies like Qualcomm and MediaTek are coming to add new chips to the production line. And Apple too. Sorry, I don't want to exclude Apple because Apple is like one of the top customers for TSMC. So that's why you see the competition between TSMC and Samsung, but Samsung's manufacturing on the 888 and the 8 Gen 1 at that production tier was not producing the yields as well as TSMC. TSMC's yields were better, which even though you have to pay more to do business with TSMC, it was a more mature fabrication and fabbing, and you got better yields out of it. So eventually your costs kind of work out in a different way than if you had done business with Samsung. All of that gets super, super complicated, and I am like at the most shallow surface level of explaining it. But James, when you talk about shrinking a die, it should bring significant benefits. What we're doing right now, and it drives me crazy, is instead of allowing for the improvement of the fabrication and the die size to deliver efficiency improvements, we're trying to tack on more performance. And I don't believe we need more performance than a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. I don't believe many people really need the more performance than a Snapdragon 865 from like 3 years ago now. And TK Bay just put out a video about a new Xiaomi tablet, and it's launching with a Snapdragon 870. It's an incredibly high performance tablet. You have a ridiculous overkill of performance on that tablet. The people who are going to buy and use that tablet are almost never going to run into the limits of that processing and compute power. But if we could take the Snapdragon 865 and die shrink it from a 7 nanometer process to a 3 nanometer process and keep everything else the same, you would see a significant increase in the battery life of that product. And that's what I feel a lot of our manufacturers are missing. I do not care about getting a better Geekbench score. It matters zero to me. But if I could keep the same Geekbench score as a chip from 4 years ago, but then I could go and tell my family and friends, this is what a high performance phone used to give us from a couple years ago, but it's gonna double or maybe even triple your battery life, I think we'd see a lot of people get really excited about that. I think many, many more people would be willing to pay for that because it's still way more performance than they need. This is still a gross overkill of performance, but we would get the battery life, especially if we could shrink down some of those radio and modem components. Would be amazing. And it would be so much better than, like I've got my Motorola, my SIM card is bouncing back and forth between my Motorola and my Pixel 7 Pro. And both the Motorola and the Pixel 7 Pro will occasionally give me Hot Pocket. And I don't know why. It's doing something in the background, an app is running, and for some reason, the chips on both of those phones are running at full bore, and it's killing my battery life, and my thigh is warm. And when it's 90 degrees outside in Southern California, and your thigh is warmer than the ambient air temperature, is real not good. But we could have stuck with that tier of performance and just radicalized how much less power it would have consumed. So James, thank you for the question. I really appreciate it. I've got one other question here that I want to get to from the Patreon. So this is a patron question. And I'm going to take a drink of water here real quick, and we can wrap out the show with that. Okay. So let me, and again, you know what I should really do is like retype the question. And so you don't see all of my private messages. Like I can't screen share this. This came from Colin over on the Patreon. That's patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy with a question about audio tech. Colin says, hey man, I was wondering if I could pick your audiophile brain again. I found an old video of yours from the Pocket nowadays. Oh, I can screen share that. I'll open this. So the video that he watched, let me go back here. And it took a while for YouTube to pull it up. This is not an often viewed video. This was from Pocket Now, 246,000 views 5 years ago. Fio X5 versus the LG V20. Should you use a dedicated music player? So I did a comparison between the Fio X5, it's a little standalone music player, had a really low power Android SoC, it was really slow and kind of chuggy and laggy, but it had incredible internal audio processing hardware. but I did a showdown between that as a standalone music player and the LG V20, which was the first year proper quad DAC, massive headphone amp, impedance detection, all of that fun stuff. The LG V10 was a monster audio player. The V20 just took it to a whole other level. So Colin asks, I was wondering if your opinion still holds true about the subject, but instead of the V20, it would be the V50 versus a dedicated digital audio player or DAC. I just started getting into IEMs and some nicer over-the-ear headphones. So Colin, that is also a very good question. And ultimately, yes, I would say, actually, I have it here next to me still too. So this is my Korean LG V50. It's got a little dust on it. This is my Korean LG V50, dual display case, and it has this handy dandy little headphone jack down here. It's got this amazing thing called a memory card slot. So you can get like a really big memory card, like bigger than 16 gigabytes or more, and bigger than that. Sorry, it's such a lame joke. But you could put a whole bunch of audio on that if you wanted to store audio locally. Let's say you had tons of playlists on your favorite music streaming service. You could save those to the memory card and not have it impact the storage on your phone. And this has one of the last variations of LG's quad DAC. So you plug into here, and it's a 4-stage ESS Saber DAC that's really good at minimizing noise internally from the components of the phone and is really good at boosting playback. So the amp on this is an audiophile grade amp that to replace it, you'd probably need to buy a Helm or a THX Onyx. And I mean to best it. So the LG amp isn't as good as the THX Onyx, but the THX Onyx is a dongle that costs roughly $200. You can find it on sale for cheaper, but that's a $200 feature that was just built into the LG V50. So here's the thing. Against a standalone audio player, the thing that is kind of a bummer about classic LG phones, the amp detects the resistance of your headphones. So if you have low resistance headphones that still require high output, the LG is not going to detect that, and the audio listening will not be nearly as good as if you have a standalone DAP, some kind of standalone media player. A perfect example would be planar magnetic headphones. So I've got my LCDs up on the shelf behind me. Those are from Audizy. I love Audizy headphones, but you need a little more oomph. When I plug my Audizy into an LG, they are technically low resistance. So the LG uses the lower amp stage, doesn't kick up all the power that I really need to get things juicy. I have to do this really gimmicky dance of plugging in with another adapter and then unplugging and then plugging into that adapter to maintain the high amp output mode. And this holds true for the LG V60 also. I always wished that they would have just given us a hard selector so that we could say high amp output or low amp output, because that's what FiiO does on their standalone Bluetooth players. So this is one of the FiiO BTRs. So this is a little Bluetooth puck. You plug your headphones in. You can go balanced or unbalanced connectors. And on the player, you go to the menu setting and you can say high amp or low amp. And LG really should have given us that. The amp on the LG phones, though, was so powerful, you could do some damage to your hearing. You could blow out cheap earbuds. You could harm someone with that kind of uncontrolled music listening. But I feel like even if you had a nag screen, there are enough people out there who bought LG for premium audio kit. They would know what they were doing. They could have given us that. It was just the ease of use where the impedance detection would help turn on the amp whenever it detected that it needed to. So you wouldn't run into that situation of someone who heard, well, if you buy an LG phone, then you have good audio, but I plugged in my headphones and they sounded terrible. Because morons be moroning. So I get why LG made it an auto switch, but I really wish they had just given us the ability to bypass that. That's the one thing that kind of holds you back on an LG. But other than that, pick up an old LG. Like if you can get your hands on a V40 in good shape, a V50, a V60, you have one of the best pocketable premium multimedia players that you can use. And it's going to be way better for things also like video. If you get a standalone DAP, it will be better just for the audio consuming experience, but it can't do anything else. Those little DAPs are miserable for like watching movies. And when you fire up, I always love doing this. Like, we're gonna wrap up talking about the Sony here. One of my favorite tests is Tron Legacy. It's basically the best Daft Punk music video we never asked for, right? Great soundtrack, really fun sound design. The movie itself is just kind of but I love the music of it so much that I'll watch it for almost every single audio gadget thing that I need to review. Man, if you fire up a movie with great sound design on an LG, it is so good. And especially later LGs where they had some of that fun like DTS and Dolby spatial audio surround manipulation. You can play with the filters of how the audio is attacking and decaying. You can mess with the EQ and the balance so that you can, if you're like me, I need a subtle tweak from left ear to right ear because I have a lot more hearing loss on my right ear than I do my left. It's just a joy. So you can always count on an old LG to be an amazing media companion. And if like that was a primary use for you, then scale back on your phone, use that for just your communication, and you can take all the load, all of your movie and music listening off to another gadget. I like that combo. I like that combo a lot because you can get an old beat up LG phone for a lot less than a new media player or a new standalone DAP, whatever thing we're trying to call it these days. Oof. Whew. So sorry, I missed a couple comments here. XNO, so much for the Farhan, so much for the micro SD card is outdated and dead. Aditya Anil, I'm so true. Once you start collecting some of these earbuds, so Aditya writes, not to mention once you go balanced on the BTR5, it's hard to go back. So I also have the BTR7, and basically it just lives like this. So this is my BTR7. This is from Theo. I flippin' love. This is a little iPod Nano or iPod Mini. It's about, it's a little bit sleeker than an iPod Mini. But I have it connected to my Odyssey planar magnetic earbuds. So this combo just exists like this forever now, and it's off of the balanced input. And I don't need the full power of a balanced input on those earbuds, but boy, howdy, does it sound good. It sounds so good. That is not a cheap combo, but man, is it nice. It's so nice. And McCorcoran, absolutely, LG could have hid this in the developer settings. Give us more control over how that's all going to be, how that should all be controlled. Oh, you can check there's an app a developer made that lets you know which setting the quad DAC is using when you plug your headphones in. LG Hi-Fi is the name of the app. I think there might have been some workaround to unofficially prompt the high impedance mode. I know that there were always these gimmicky dances. Like if you used this app and you played this track, then you could go back and it would keep the high impedance mode up. I stopped doing all that. I found that there was like a headphone line that you could extend. So on the LG V60, you couldn't plug most headphones into the V60 if you had the dual display case on. So I got a little extender. That's the word I'm looking for. A TRRS extender. And I would plug that into the phone through the case. And then if I plugged that in with high impedance headphones, the phone would say, okay, you have high impedance headphones. Here's the full power of the amp. Then I would leave the extender in place, but I would disconnect those headphones and connect my planar magnetics. But because I never disconnected the extender, the amp mode would never reset. And I would just leave it like that all the time. That was a pain, but you could do it. You could totally do it. Really, they should have just given us the option to flick a switch and then go, hey, there you go, full amp. And that would have been great. But yeah, so thank you, Colin, for sending that in. If you would like to have a question read, I would like to make mailbag a more regular feature. You can hit me up on the Patreon. That's probably the best place for me to always catch a new message. And but then other places around social media, we could make this a more regular feature. I realized that I completely skipped talking about the Sony AX7. And I do want to spend some time on that. I teased it at the beginning of this. I really meant that to be the main crux of the hardware section. So I know the podcast is already running a little long, but we got to spend a little time talking about this thing because it's nuts. It's crazy pants. Okay, so what if you were the kind of person who loved surround sound audio and you wanted a more cinema bubble style listening experience no matter where you traveled, uh, you would probably be a little frustrated by just the standard array of Bluetooth speakers. I've got a Bluetooth boombox. I've got some Bluetooth satellites that can connect to each other to create left channel, right channel. On my desk right there, I've got like a little BenQ electrostatic speaker. I mean, it's a really nice little Bluetooth speaker. It's probably a little hyped up for what it actually delivers. I have never heard a portable, open air, surround sound, wireless audio device. The only things that I think we can point to that do sort of surround sound, Bluetooth, and portable would be headphones. So, like, gaming headsets are really good at this. You put the gaming headset on, and it can simulate through like reverb tricks and stuff. It can simulate like a surround sound stereo experience. I shouldn't say surround sound stereo, or surround sound speaker kind of experience. And then you can get really fancy. There are several products out now that can do head tracking. So like I started doing this with my Odyssey, again, the Mobius. I love Odyssey headphones. You tell the headphones where the screen is, and then it maps that, and wherever you move your head, it's like you've got surround sound, but it's more like spatially tuned to the direction of the TV. So like if the video's over here and I turn my head away, it's like all of the speakers kind of stay put in space. It's a much more convincing style of surround sound than just basic spatial audio. I don't like most spatial audio because it's like the speakers stay relative to your head, and that's not how movie theaters or good stereos work. You know, what you want is as your head moves, the speakers stay in place and the sound and direction of the audio changes with the direction of your head. Sorry, that was really complicated and long-winded. There has really not been. Someone please correct me because I have not found one. Sony contacted me a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, would you want to take this for a spin?" And I said, "Yes, heck yes, please send it my way." I have not found a portable surround sound solution. I don't believe that has ever really existed. So this is the Sony AX7. You know what I need to do? I'm going to turn off my camera tracking here for just a bit. Just let that frame kind of open up, and then I can kind of sit sideways. So this is the Sony AX7. It is, I don't know how to describe it in terms of size. It is smaller than most of the Bluetooth boom boxes. Like, have you seen those Anchors, those Soundcore, really meaty Boom Plus, whatever they're called? This is going to be smaller than one of those, but it's going to be bigger than most of your little shelf Bluetooth speakers. But what this is a 4-channel system. So you've got 2 speakers in the front that put out what would sort of be your 1, 2, 3 on a 5.1 system. So these are mixed to do an amazing first channel, center channel, and left right. But it's two speakers, and then on the sides there are these like empty resonance chambers. You can get some pretty good rumble coming out of this main housing. But then on top you've got these like sort of Princess Leia satellites, and you detach, you hear these little bleeps and bloops, and then these little satellite speakers you place behind where you're listening. So you put the main housing in front of you, you put the little satellite speakers behind you, and then as it connects to your source, it's a triangle of speakers that creates this little audio bubble. It works so much better than I was expecting it would be able to work. So I've got a full review of that from, well, it's not really a review. I've got a full embargo first impressions. I think I called a review on my YouTube channel on SomeGadgetGuy.com, and the full 4K version is of course on the Patreon. I've been using it for quite a bit since producing that video. The one thing that's kind of tricky is you need to use this on sort of the same plane that you sit. So say you're in a hotel room, it's really easy to set this up on a bed or a couch and kind of be at the same level as like the TV and have the speakers all around you. I don't have anything like that here in the office. So if I leave this in the office, it's kind of just a stereo speaker, and it sounds okay it sounds good. I shouldn't say it sounds okay. It sounds good as a stereo speaker, but that's not the hook. This thing is kind of pricey. Sony's MSRP is $499. So at $500, you don't want something that sounds pretty good. Because as a stereo speaker, you can easily get much cheaper stereo speakers that will match it in terms of just sort of plain Bluetooth audio quality. But that has been the tricky thing. So we've been leaving this in the bedroom because it is kind of fun to like pop out the stereo speakers and we're watching a movie snuggled up together in bed. That's kind of nice. It's kind of cute. Mm-hmm. But it's the only thing I found where you can have that multiple listener experience. You can't easily share that audio listening on headphones. So if I'm wearing headphones and my wife's wearing headphones, we're not really together. Does that make sense? You know, like even if we're watching the same thing at the same time in headphones, it's still kind of an isolating experience. And I really don't think we've even tried to do that. Actually, no. So I think it's okay like if you're on an airplane. We've done that a lot on airplanes where we'll use a Y adapter and listen to the same thing at the same time, but you're on an airplane. So it's already really loud and noisy, and it's okay that you're kind of separated from each other. I think the last time we tried listening to the same thing at the same time on Bluetooth headphones was for one of the TCL phones. I want to say it was the TCL 20 Pro. What was that, 2 years ago? Maybe almost 3 years ago now? It was a little while ago. It was TCL's sort of clone of the LG Velvet. We haven't tried doing wireless audio like that together since. So what's nice is the bubble that this can create is about the perfect size for two people, two grown-ups to sit like side by side to kind of snuggle up next to each other and sort of share the audio bubble. It even worked pretty well with me, my wife, and my daughter. So she was kind of sitting in between us, and we fired up. I was showing her a clip from Tron, and the same thing. We were all sitting together, and it was part of the light cycles battle on the grid, and like it worked really well. This is a very particular kind of audio consumption device. I still don't have in my head a good, clear image of who the exact right consumer is for this. I feel like someone who's living like, you know, sort of a premium van life would love something like this. Like I have a friend, Katie. She's a rock climber, and she does a lot of like nature and conservation, and she's constantly consulting on stuff like that. But she kind of made her social media following by I think for 2 years she lived out of her van and was road tripping around the country, but wasn't just like, oh, I live in a van. She would really kind of share what that experience was, like zero impact on the environment, and like she's really, really clever. I could see something like this being the surround sound audio experience of living in an RV or living in a van or something like that. You can move it around really easily. You can add people to the experience really easily. And you want it to be high quality. You don't want just like a cheap Bluetooth speaker to watch a movie on. This is something that like kind of takes you up that tier. So the price of it matches the usefulness for that kind of person. I'm having a harder time if your work and life are a little bit like me in this office right now, because I don't have anywhere to put this in my office. I'd love to like set this up on my TV on that opposite wall, but that's too far. The satellite speakers won't create the right bubble if I'm watching TV from like 10 feet away and the speaker is next to the TV at 10 feet away, but the satellites are right behind me. It doesn't sound bad, but it doesn't sound right for creating that spatial audio bubble. So this is one of the most ambitious wireless audio products I've ever seen. Since my video, I've continued to use it quite a bit. We're going to be taking it, we do have a road trip kind of planned for the summer. Excuse me. We do have a road trip planned for the summer, and I'm planning on taking it with us to go hit that road trip. And I think we'll get some good mileage out of it there. Haha, pun intended. But I am having a little bit of a kind of a brain lock where it's not built to replace a sound bar. It's not built for like how I have my office set up. It's a little harder to fit or to place in the way that I kind of use some of the tech that I already have. So this is something really, really new. And that also brings, it's a double-edged sword. It's something I've never heard before. It's something I think is really exciting, but until you can experience it, you don't even know what it is. When I describe it to other people, they don't have something to compare it to. I mean, I can tell them with words, it's kind of like you took, surround sound speakers and you put them into this little cute shell, and then you can use those surround sound speakers anywhere that you can take the bass. And invariably I get, oh, so like, can I replace my sound bar with it? And you're like, no, you really wouldn't want to do that. I mean, technically, yes, you could, but you really wouldn't want to. And so there's a bit of this translation. It's really difficult to kind of express until you can just sit someone down and put it in front of them and have them listen to it. It doesn't really click. It doesn't really register what it could be. And I'm having the same problem with that as I've had with like my wearable displays, where I'll tell people about these and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess it sounds kind of cool. And I've had parents like tell me like, oh yeah, hey, let my kid try it. And so I put it on their child and their child's like, whoa, this is amazing. And then I'll go to ask the parents if they want to try it. And people my age are, oh, no, don't worry about me. No, I don't need to take it for a spin. And I don't understand that. It's like they got off the fashion train, but they also got off the tech train. And whatever they understand about technology right now, today, is all that they want to handle. And they're not interested in taking that trip any further. They're done. It's over. I think I told you that story. I was playing with my Steam Deck at a little sort of like friend get together for the last day of my daughter's first grade, and out of all the parents that were hanging out after school, and all the kids that wanted to take these are my X-Real glasses that I'm holding up right now. At the time, I think I was using the Rokids. All these kids were wanting to give it a try, and I'm putting the glasses on their face, and they're looking around, and oh my gosh, this is crazy. Only one mom gave it a shot. And it was more, I said, hey, do you want to try it? She's like, oh, I don't know, it's okay, let the kids do it. And I could fire up some Tetris. And she was like, Tetris is my jam, do it. But it was more, she wanted to play Tetris on my Steam Deck than she was really interested in the glasses. But as soon as she put the glasses on her face, she could not explain to the other moms what it was like. There was a language translation barrier. She had an experience and she had feelings about it, but she had no language to describe what it was like. And that's kind of the issue I'm running into with the AX7. I have used it. I really like it. I have had an experience with this product creating a mobile surround sound field, and I can't really describe it in words well enough for other people to think that it's something that they would want to take to take for a spin, to give it a try. It's tricky. It makes my brain hurt. It makes my brain hurt a lot. From Awesome Possum 98, that sounds quite near field. How's the room filling ability if placed on a nightstand? And it's good, but not great. That is not the point of this product. You can bump the main unit on the AX7 pretty loud, but it's really, Sony built something, and Sony does this a lot, because like Sony on Xperia phones, they don't have very powerful amps, but Sony cares more about operation within a certain envelope that reduces distortion. And that's a big factor on the Xperia headphone jack. Those are some of the lowest distortion headphone jacks that you can find within a certain envelope or a certain tolerance. There's kind of a feeling like that on the AX7 also. When the satellites are all on the main body, you can use this like a standard stereo Bluetooth speaker, and in a small office like mine, my office is like 8 by 9, 9 by 10, something like that. It'll do a reasonably good job of filling this space with good audio. But I've got much, much cheaper Bluetooth speakers that can create a reasonable facsimile of that. Like the BenQ, people made fun of me. This little BenQ speaker, oh no, my pillow! Ah, my back! Whew, that was almost a catastrophe. So this little BenQ speaker with these electrostatic panels, the electrostatic panels don't do a whole lot, but they add just a little bit of articulation to your sound mix. The majority is coming from these two drivers here in the middle of the casing, in the middle of the housing. This will do about the same job as the AX7 if we're only looking at it for stereo playback. When I initially reviewed this, people kept telling me I was insane for liking this at around $200. So if you're looking at what is the kind of room filling potential, you can fill a room with reasonably high quality Bluetooth speaker audio quality. I think I repeated the word quality more times than I needed to there, for a lot less than what the AX7 is attempting to do. So the AX7 brings in additional capabilities that this Bluetooth speaker can't do, and that's where you have to quantify, is this something where I'll use it as a nightstand speaker, and I'll use it enough as the surround sound speaker it was designed to be to warrant spending more than twice what a good Bluetooth listening experience can resemble. And that's where it's kind of breaking my brain a little, because I know there is someone out there who is going to value that quality of surround sound. Finding that person with the way that Sony really doesn't advertise their products in traditional media as much anymore is an astounding challenge. How do you find the person who really is the right fit for the AX7? I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to reach that person who I know is going to pick this up and is just going to adore it. And there was nothing else they would have spent their money on. There's no other solution that they would have valued as much. I know that person exists. And I know there are quite a few of them, but I don't know how to find them. All right, back on the shelf with you, Benk. The Trevolo. Let me take one more drink of water here and we can wrap this all up. I'm getting on to 2.5 hours. I'm really sorry. I really meant to kind of incorporate that AX7 earlier into the podcast. I've just been so tickled with it. It is such a fun piece of audio tech. Hold on one second here. Awesome Possum. It looks like a Sony alarm clock without the clock part. Yeah, there are other people like, oh, it should have had a phone dock. And you're like, I get why people would want a phone dock. But again, it's not something that you would want to just like pop a phone into and listen like this. You don't want to do that. So if you did do like a phone thing, you kind of want the screen and landscape for video. And I guess that makes sense, but really it's not that kind of product. It's not an iPhone speaker dock. It's really funky. And as soon as people start comparing it to other things, they're almost always comparing it against something else. Oh, Simon says, Hypno, this is absolutely true. It should have had 89 more speakers and cost $100. And then it would be worth it for the monies. Because the only way I can talk about technology is to talk about a company and then talk about what they should have charged for their products. And it's always they should have charged less than they did. And that's the only contribution I can make because I'm really good at tech. And by being really good at tech, I'll point to another company and say they should have charged less. And that's how it works. John Gow. I can't really find a good use case for myself for the AX7, but it looks so good and I kind of want it. Yeah. I thought it was really funny. Someone else left me a comment on my AX7 video. Oh, this looks like such a solution in search of a problem. You know, like, this is so easy. The problem is I want surround sound. So the solution is a portable speaker package that can give me surround sound. I don't know how to make that any easier, right? That's like airplane in the hangar. Open up wide. Eat your strained peas. That one's pretty easy. What I'm talking about though is who is the consumer, finding the consumer who really does value cinema surround sound in a way that they want to travel with it. They want to take it places. And that kind of hurts my brain a little, but that person is out there. Ashland, the solution in search of a problem was me. Did you leave me that comment? How dare you? How very dare you? Ashland, come on. The problem and solution matrix here is pretty simple, but the defining of the consumer is radically more difficult. It hurts my brain. But yeah, we should probably wrap this all up. He's saying, I did do it. No, don't apologize. It was a great comment for me to riff off of on my podcast. But I do want to highlight, I feel the problem solution is pretty easily defined. It's the, who is the consumer that wants this problem solved is very niche and is impossible to quantify. Like, I can't, the reason why I'm saying, I'm stressing this so hard, there are some things that you pick up and you go, oh, this has a very mainstream kind of appeal and I get where it can fit into someone's current workflow. And so much of our tech is, I just want the same thing but newer. Think about how many phones and computers and tablets, we're not really pushing the envelope on this gear anymore because we're kind of afraid of scaring off consumers. People understand the Bluetooth speaker, right? I mean, like from the, we're going on what? 15 years? Is that about where we're at with Bluetooth speakers now? Something like that? That is really well-worn territory and people understand, I have something that looks like a tube or I have something that looks like a box and it makes noise. And that's what I need it to do. Breaking through that to do something different with a Bluetooth speaker, to me, is ultimately probably going to be a losing proposition for a company like Sony, in that they have to retrain an audience to have different expectations on what a Bluetooth speaker can do. And the product demonstrates that. The product does that phenomenally well. But Sony isn't marketing to the level of dragging people out of the apathy and the current momentum or lack of momentum that we see in Bluetooth speakers. You need to do so much more work to get someone to look at something they think they understand and then explain to them how it's not what they think it is. The trouble I have when I'm talking about wearable displays. Oh, but it should have been this and should have been cheaper and should have been more powerful and be a computer and blah, 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 blah. That's someone who doesn't get it. someone who doesn't understand what these things can do. So anyway, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Barry is correct. I thought we were going to noon your time. Well, I got the pillow, and the pillow has extended my stamina. So the pillow might stay in the office even for when my back isn't hurting. This is so much more comfortable. I like this. I'm like kind of lean back into it, kind of snuggle in. This is great. This is awesome. I love this. So everybody, we are going to close out this show. I know this one got real rambly too. I kind of feel it's probably going to be the theme for the summer. I'm trying to talk to a couple other individuals about maybe doing some interviews. I used to do the creator chat way back in the day, when this podcast was a little newer, was a little fresher. I'm not going to go back to just interviewing creators for the sake of interviewing creators. But there are a couple things that are coming up that I really want to try and highlight, and some friends that are working on some really cool projects. And I'm really excited to see new efforts on platforms that we feel like the potential has already expired. I don't know why I'm being so cagey. They've already put out a number of pitches about it, but we recently closed out the All About Android podcast. That was over on the Twit network. Well, some of those hosts have decided that they weren't done making a podcast about Android. And so there's going to be a new podcast coming out called Android Faithful. Ron was kind enough to send me a message to let me know that this was going to be an ongoing project, and extended an invite to be one of the guest contributors on that podcast, just like I've done guest appearances on All About Android. And I was really touched that he took the time, because he's building a Patreon, he's setting up this new podcast network, he's got to get his RSS feeds, he's got logos and designs, he does a lot of work in PR and management for huge companies, and he still included me in a little message saying like, hey Juan, just wanted you to know we're doing this and we'd love to have you on and guest. And it's how we catch up. Ron and I are pals. It's kind of nice being able to like just talk, right? So when we see those kinds of initiatives, and when we see that kind of work going on, I feel it's incredibly important for us to not shrug it off, to not be apathetic, to not say, oh, well, that's cool, I'll give it a listen or something or whatever. We really want to take the time to like share and promote and encourage and help people find it, because people won't find it on their own anymore. Online search is a dumpster fire. AI is wrecking all of our ability to spread better information. All of these platforms are algorithmically vice gripped, so that you have to like spend a ton of money or find some kind of viral solution to find that audience. And if we want to have a cool conversation every week about Android or about smartphones or just tech in general, we have to be a part of sharing and distributing and contributing to that, because it won't just happen on its own. We can't build organically like we used to in the old days of the internet. So be on the lookout for some cool stuff. I would like to bring some of those kinds of conversations to this podcast. Maybe over the summer, it's a better place for me to start looking at segments, so that I can stop talking for 10 minutes and play something pre-recorded. We're going to have to play around with the format of this just to make it a little bit more sustainable, and not that it's 2.5 hours of me rambling every single week. So why don't we go ahead and close this out now? Oh, ER 1980, that's great news. I think it's great what they are doing after the demise of All About Android. I was just so tickled. Not just that, but it was also just like, it was so sweet to get the message personally from Ron before they went live. And I will absolutely be jumping on their show as soon as I can work out on my schedule when to join them and when they'll have me. So, folks, there's a ton of stuff that is still percolating. I have really cool things that I would love to talk to you about and to show you. And as soon as I am able to, we will make that happen. In the meantime, please check out, all of the various social media platforms where we can have conversations, get into some of these discussions about cool tech. I'm spending most of my time on Mastodon these days, so that's the best place to catch me publicly. But of course, the absolute, the thing that I'm checking the most frequently is obviously my Patreon, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. I'm spending as little time in YouTube comments as I can, just because it's become terrible. It's almost as bad for my mental health as Twitter has become. It's just really disappointing to see the interactions all kind of falling apart on what used to be our institutions for online discourse and for sharing cool stuff. But that doesn't mean that we just let it fail. It means we go and find those conversations that we used to have on other platforms, and we have a good time doing that too. So, everybody, I hope you have an amazing week. I hope you do awesome with your technology. I hope you are awesome with your technology. I'll catch you all here next week for another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. I'm probably going to bring back the pillow. Pillow was a good play. I'm really digging this. Be safe. Take care. I love you all. I'll catch you.